Hello, in this video we're going to cover index and match, which are similar to VLOOKUP, but actually a lot more robust. They're more suited to handling more complicated formulas and problems, and they work very well together as a set. So you can think of index as kind of like a GPS. You give it the two coordinates um, that you need to set within the formula, and then it returns the location or the cell address for you, right? The value within that cell for you by inputting two different coordinates. The coordinates are the positions within an array using the row and the column as the variables. So what we have here is an array. I just want to fix this real quick. Is an array of distances between cities in the United States. You can think of this table or this range as a set of numbers that tells you that between Boston and Chicago, for example, it's 983 miles, or between Miami and Phoenix is 2,359 miles. So we can write a formula to find that number so that we don't need to figure it out ourselves. We don't need to look at the table and try to figure out what the number is and enter it manually. We can write a formula to go and look for the number for us based on the column and the row. So the distance between Boston and Denver, for example, we'll use the index function equals index, parenthesis. It gives us the syntax. So it wants the array or the range. This is the range. And I've already named this range distances. All right, so I can just double click that. Distances is the range, named range. And then it just wants the row number and the column number. The row number starts with the first cell in the range and just count down. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. There's 8 rows, and it just goes on forever. And column-wise is the same thing. Starts with the first cell and goes to the right. 1, 2, 3. This is an 8 by 8 matrix because the number of cities is the same on the left and on the top. It's the same. So we want to go from Boston, which is row number 1, to Denver, which is row number 1, 2, 3, 4. And the parentheses, hit enter, 991 miles. That's correct, right? From Seattle to Miami, I can just drag the formula down. All I have to do is change the values. So Seattle is the 8th row, and Miami is the 6th. I can tell this very quickly just by looking at the numbers here next to each city name. And these numbers are the same as they would be across the top as well. So I can just enter the numbers from here. That would be the distance between Seattle and Miami. Seattle and Miami, right here. That's the correct number. We can also use index to add up all the values within a row or a column. And I've given the formula right here. If we want to add up the values across the row or down a column, we use the sum formula just like we did before, but we combine it with the index. Right? We put a parenthesis around it, and we put the function within a function, basically a nested function. And we have the same named range. And if we want to say, for example, this says to Seattle, let's say it could be from anywhere. Let's say from, in this case, it would be from, let's say, Boston to Seattle. If I were to go from Boston to Chicago to Dallas to Denver to LA to Miami to Phoenix to Seattle, I want to know the total if I were to make all those stops. And to do that, we just put a 0 there where we would normally put the column. We put a 0, or vice versa, we could put a 0 in the row and then a number in the column if we want to go down instead of across. Right? And there we get the total of all these numbers in this row using the index function. 14,640. Now I'm going to use the same, actually we've got to finish this. So let's say down here we want to write a formula to tell us the distance, right, between each of the cities. Let's say we want to go from Seattle to Phoenix to LA to Denver to Chicago and back to Seattle, right? We can enter a formula here using index that will give us the distance between each location. So we'll just type equals index like before. The array we know is distances. And instead of typing in a number, individual number, we're going to use this cell. Okay, that's going to be our cell. And then for the row, we're going to use the next cell. So C21 and C22. Because this is an 8x8 matrix and it's the same cities across the top and bottom, we can do this. So the distance between 8 and 7, between Seattle and Phoenix, is 482 miles, right? We can see that right here, 482 miles. Now all we have to do is just pull that down like this, and it gives us the distance between each one of our cities on our road trip. Pretty cool, huh? And if we want to, we can add a sum here and get the total miles of our road trip. Cool. All right. So match is in the same category with VLOOKUP and index, but match works a little bit differently. The way match works is that it looks up the value in the array based on another cell, kind of like VLOOKUP, except that cell doesn't need to be next to the value that it's looking up. It can be anywhere on the spreadsheet. So in this case, I use the list, the validation. If you remember from last week, data validation, right? And you could do it based on a list. So I created a list, basically a drop-down list using these values of the cities. You'll see here you can pick whichever city you want from the value, those 8 cities. And I copied it here for city number 2. So the idea is if we enter city number 1 and then tell it city number 2, we want it to look in the array and tell us the distance between the 2 cities just by entering the names of the cities. All right. So for this, we're going to use match, and what we want to do is equals match parentheses, and the lookup value is going to be that cell, but it doesn't need to be next to it. It could be anywhere on the sheet. It just happens to be right next to it. And then the lookup array, right? We know what that is. Actually, we don't know what that is. The lookup array that we're looking for is a new one. It's going to be just the names of the cities. Just the names of those cities. That's the array. And the match type is either less than, greater than, or exact, and we want exact. It's similar to VLOOKUP, where we had true and false, except this time there's 3 options: less than, greater than, and exact, right? So what this has done is match has told us that Dallas is in the 3rd row of this array. So it's given us the number 3. If I scroll this to here, pull that down, Miami is in the 5th row. It's in the 5th row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I see what happened. It changed my thing here. Sorry. This should be 10 because I scrolled down without putting the dollar signs in to make it fixed. So my arrays changed. So this is good. You can see how even when I'm creating spreadsheets, I make mistakes, and it takes me a second to figure out what I did wrong. And I'm actually going to leave this kind of stuff into my recordings. I'm not going to try to edit this out and fix it. I want you to see that these things happen when you're creating a spreadsheet. So now it works. So Miami is 6, right? So we have our 2 values. These are the 2 values that we can put into the index, right? So we're using match and index together. So the distance equals index. All right, the array we know is distances. Oops, didn't want to hit enter there, sorry. I meant to click double click. Distances. And the row is 3. And the column is city 2. And then we just end it. So now we know that's 13,332 miles. Let's check that out. Dallas to Miami, 1332. If I change, let's say I want to go a different city. I go to Phoenix. You see how it automatically updates value for us? It's dynamic now. Change any city, and it is going to tell us what the distance is. And just to optimize my code here, I don't really need to output these two variables using match. What I can do is I can put these two match formulas right into the index formula to replace the column and row. This one. And then here's the second one. Just going to paste it in here. So this index reads distances, right, which is my array. And I want to match C35. Actually, I want to match C34. And then my range is in purple here on the screen. So I'm matching the red value next to city 1 with the values in the purple range to come up with the number for my row. And then doing the same thing again with the green value for city 2, same lookup table, same range for the column. And you'll see now my whole formula here includes the index with two match formulas inside combined together. And anytime I change either one of these drop downs, it's going to update the distance. Now, what this is getting at, what we're leading to here is that basically what we're doing is we're creating a connection between input variables, right, and the output, right, that the formulas generate. We're creating a connection between the city and the distance, the relationship, you could say, between the city and the distance using a form, an input variable in a form where the user specifies which city they're going to be leaving from and which city they're going to, and then the program calculates the distance, right? So index is kind of the opposite of VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP that we talked about last week looks at one variable, one value, and compares it to a range of values and chooses the closest match. But index asks for the one value and then looks for it within the table array, right? It finds it within the table. It finds that location, that GPS coordinates at longitude and latitude within the table and returns the value. So they're kind of the opposite of each other. And match just does what match says. It just matches. It matches up the value with its location within the range and returns a number. So we can use VLOOKUP, match, and index together in any number of combinations. But what we're really doing is we're creating a kind of database, a relational database, where if we tell the database that we're looking for one value, we don't need to know ourselves as a user where the data is stored. By giving it the parameters, it finds the data for us. And when you begin to think about it, you could also have each of these cells within the range. They can also be dynamically created and updated, on the fly or whenever it's needed. So, for example, you may be a business that has a list of products, and you may have a price for the product, a description for the product unique identifier, but none of that stuff's important to the user or to the consumer who wants to buy your product. The only thing the consumer needs to worry about is what the name of your product is. Well, when your consumer selects the name of the product, you use these functions in Excel to look up that product, find its price, find its description, find how many are in stock, where warehouse is located in, and so forth, all at one time, in order to process that particular order for that customer. So this is really just the starting stages of developing a DSS where we can have these sort of relationships, and they can become quite complicated, and the formulas themselves can become quite long and sophisticated, with many different use of many different formulas and functions, right, use of many different functions together in one formula to produce the desired result. All right, that's it for today. We'll get back together on the next video. We're going to talk about texts, how to work with texts. Sometimes our data is text, it's not numbers, and working with text is different than working with numbers. Just like in the video after that, we're talking about working with dates. The way that we add dates or use dates is different than whole numbers as well. All right, that's all. Thanks.